Sawete discipuli. Sorry that we weren't able to have class today, but I thought I might make you a video so that we wouldn't get behind in our lessons. I'd like to continue on with chapter 24. So we'll go ahead and open up your book to chapter 24 and we'll start with our recitation. We begin with the demonstrative pronoun iste. Iste, ista, istud. Istius, istius, istius. Isti, isti, isti. Istum, istam, istud. Isto, ista, isto. And then moving on to the plural chart, which is down below in your book, would be isti, istai, ista. Estorum, estarum, estorum. Istis, istis, istis. Estos, estas, esta. Estis, estis, estis. Okay, so we are going to be talking about this demonstrative pronoun, iste. Now we've already learned two other demonstrative pronouns. We learned hic, haec, hoc, which is our pronoun for this, and then the plural would be these. And remember, those are something that is referring to something that is close to you. If I'm talking about this pen right here, I would have to use hic, haec, or hoc to speak of it. The other demonstrative pronoun that we learned was ile, eli, elud, which is our pronoun for that. And if we were speaking of something over there, that tree over there, I would have to use my ile, ela, elud. So you might be thinking, if we have our demonstrative pronoun for this and we have our demonstrative pronoun for that, why do we need another one? Well, we have another demonstrative pronoun in Latin that we don't have in English. So what we just recited together with iste, ista, istud is another form of that, but rather than speaking of that which is far away, the way we would speak in English, it would be referring to that near you. So if we were going to say that tree near you, in Latin we would use this other form of that instead of the ile form. We would use iste. Let's take a look at how we would use these demonstrative pronouns with some nouns. Remember, demonstrative pronouns are going to tell us which one. They're going to answer the question which. So if we're speaking of a flower or a rose, if I wanted to say this rose, well, I have to look at my word rose, and my noun is feminine. It is singular, we'll say in the nominative case. So I have to have my adjective, demonstrative adjective, matching it. So I'm going to use the singular, feminine, nominative form. Okay? So if I was going to say this rose, I would say haec rosa. If I was speaking of one that was far away from me, I would use the demonstrative pronoun that. And I would use the feminine, singular, nominative form. So I would pick ila rosa for that rose. If I'm speaking of that rose near you, I would pick ista, which would be the feminine, singular, nominative form to match rosa. The other thing that iste, ista, istud can be used for is something if it's with contempt. We want to speak of that rose or that flower. So maybe it was a flower that didn't smell nicely. So if we wanted to say get rid of that flower, we would say ista rosa. But the context is going to tell you whether or not the rose is something that we don't like or if it's something that's just near you. Okay, so we have this rose, we have that rose, and we have that rose near you or that rose. Okay, moving on, let's try with a masculine word. We'll use gladius, which is our word for sword. If I was going to say this sword, well, sword is masculine, singular, and in this case, the nominative form. So I'm going to pick my demonstrative pronoun that's going to match. So masculine, singular, nominative is going to be hic. So I have hic gladius for this sword. If I'm going to say that sword, same thing. I'm going to go to the masculine, singular, nominative. So I can match my masculine, singular, nominative noun. Because remember, your adjective matches the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case, right? Okay, So for masculine, for that sword, I would say ile gladius. If I'm going to speak of that sword near you, I'm going to say isto gladius. If you want to use your chart, you can pull it up. And so here's my chart for iste, ista, istud. And you can see that I'm matching gladius, masculine, singular, nominative. Can you see that? Did I get it right? Look at my board. Any problem? Oh, it actually shouldn't be isto, right? If I was going to speak of it in the ablative case, if I was going to use it as the object of the preposition in, with, by, from, I would have to have gladius in a different form. So the correct form of iste, ista, istud to go with gladius is not going to be isto, it's going to be iste. So let's go ahead and fix this. Maybe you caught that. But if not, sometimes mistakes can help you because you can practice fixing them. Next, let's move on to our vocabulary for the week. New vocabulary words. The first word is wolo, wolare, wolawi, wolatum. Your turn. Wolo, wolare, wolawi, wolatum, which would mean to fly. And as we put it up here, now and then it's going to be good that you say in English the 4 principal parts. Remember, all of our verbs have 4 principal parts. The first one would be the first person present tense, I fly. The second would be the infinitive of the verb, to fly. The third would be the perfect first person tense, I flew. And the fourth would be the passive participle, or flown. So you would say, I fly, to fly, I flew, flown. So you might want to go through some of your verbs and remember the 4 principal parts and what they are in English. And once we get to using the last 2 principal parts, it's going to be very easy for you because you'll already have them memorized. Moving on to word 2. Pecco, peccare, peccavi, peccatum, which is to sin. Your turn. Pecco, peccare, peccavi, peccatum. Next word. Iro, urare, urawi, uratum. Your turn. Iro, urare, urawi, uratum, which is to take an oath. And notice the ecclesiastical spelling is on the second row, which begins with a J. Classical spelling is always going to be an I. Moving on. Damno, damnare, damnavi, damnatum, which is to condemn. Your turn. Damno, damnare, damnavi, damnatum, to condemn. Next word. Concilio, conciliare, conciliavi, conciliatum. Your turn. Concilio, conciliare, conciliavi, conciliatum, which is to bring together or to unite. Next word. Conservo, conservare, conservavi, conservatum, which would be to keep or preserve. Your turn. Conservo, conservare, conservavi, conservatum. And if that was the ecclesiastical pronunciation, remember we would actually pronounce the V, so it would be conservo, conservare. So again, if you hear that, you'll recognize the word. The next word is iudex, iudicis. Your turn. Iudix, iudicis, which is judge. Now notice we've moved on. We're not dealing with verbs anymore. We are now dealing with nouns. So if they come in 2 forms, we know it's a noun. And can we tell what declension we're dealing with? If the genitive singular ends in is, what declension are we? Hopefully somebody said, 3rd declension. Yes. So these are 3rd declension words. Moving on to the next word would be potestas, potestatis, which would mean power, where we get our word omnipotence, God being all-powerful. Next word, auctoritas, auctoritatis, which would be our word influence or authority. Your turn. Auctoritas, auctoritatis, for authority. And you can hear it in there. Next we have auctor, auctoris. Your turn. Auctor, auctoris. And that would be ancestor, originator, supporter. You can pick one and you'll probably be fine. Next we have lex legis, lex legis. Ecclesiastical pronunciation would be lex legis. In case you hear that, recognize that G can be be different depending on your pronunciation, but we will learn it as lex legis for law or contract. On the next page, you have a couple of review vocabulary words. I'm going to leave those to you. Last week in class, we talked a little bit about our verb tenses and how we have many more verb tenses in English than we have in Latin. In speaking of the present tense, in Latin, we have one way to write it. So if I was going to, in the present tense, write I stand, I would write it sto. But I could also translate that in English instead of I stand as I am standing. So the first one, I stand, would be my simple present tense. My second one, I am standing, would be the present progressive tense in English, I am standing. Or I could use the emphatic English tense, I do stand. But either way, we're trying to express this in Latin, we're just going to write it as sto. Doesn't that make it easy? Yes. But know that it can be translated in 3 different ways. The same goes for the imperfect tense. If I want to say I was standing, and let me say first off, if you always translate it, I was doing it for the imperfect, you will not go wrong. So it's a good habit to be in to translate it that way. But there are other possibilities. So it could be I was standing. It could be I used to stand. So something that I did in the past, it was kind of a habitual thing. I didn't really complete it. It was something that it was an ongoing thing I did in the past. Or just a completely ongoing thing, I kept standing. So it could be, the wind was blowing at 500 miles an hour and I kept standing. So it just implies that the action never ended, okay? So we either have the, and I like to think of the imperfect as the, I was doing it and I got interrupted. I was playing baseball and then it rained. So I didn't get to complete the game. I was doing it. I got interrupted. It wasn't perfect. It was imperfect. Remember, if you always stick with the I was doing it, you're never going to go wrong, okay? Okay, the last thing I'd like to do for our lesson for today is translate, practice how we figure out what case to put our nouns and adjectives in and things like that, and just go through it together step by step, just in case anybody's struggling. And I know that you're all working on fixing your tests. I think it was number 12, and you're going to turn them in next time for extra credit after the break. So just in case you need a little extra practice, let's go ahead and practice. So I have the sentence, this old man has 10 sons. All right, so in English, generally you would think we should start at the beginning of the sentence. But because this is Latin, we're not going to start at the beginning of the sentence. And the reason is because our adjectives, and you'll notice we have 2 of them, we have this and we have old, have to modify this word. And that means they have to match this word in gender, number, and case. So I'm going to start with my subject, figure out gender, number, and case, and then I can figure out what to do with my adjectives. So as I look at my word man, I know that it's going to be masculine, it's going to be singular, and if it's the subject of the sentence, it's going to be in the nominative case. So that means that these adjectives are going to have to match. So if I'm going to go ahead and write my sentence, I'm going to pick the masculine, singular, nominative form of this. So that would be my hick, hike, hawk. And the masculine form is going to be hick. So I'll start my sentence with hick, right? Okay, so I have my demonstrative pronoun, this. I picked hic because it is masculine, singular, and nominative. Then I'm going to use my word man, and the word for man is weir. So I have weir, and then my adjective that describes him in quality, being old, is going to follow the noun it's modifying, and my word for old is antiquus, aum, and I'm going to use the masculine, singular, nominative, so that would be antiquus. Okay, and then I'm going to say, this old man, so here's my subject, and what is my verb? This old man has, so this is my verb, and then what does he have? This old man has sons, so sons will be the direct object. And you can ask Do sons rename or describe the old man? No. The answer is no. It's the DO, direct object. And then 10 is my adjective telling me how many sons. So I'm going to next put my direct object. Actually, next I'll put my word 10. And we know that the number 10 in Latin is, you can count on your fingers if you need to, and we come to decem. Okay, now I'm going to need sons to be in the direct object case. Can you remember which case the direct object takes? And if you said accusative, perfect. So if you needed to, you could go through your cases. So our word for son would be filius. It is masculine, and you could say us, o, that's the singular. E, orum, is, os, that would be the accusative plural. So I'm going to write filios. And my verb goes at the end of the sentence in Latin. So he has, and the verb for to have would be habeo. But I don't have 10 sons. The man has 10 sons. So the pronoun we would use would be he. So we say habeo, habes, habate would be for he, she, or it has. And there is your translation for this old man has 10 sons. Hic vir anticus decem filios habet. Very good. Thank you for watching this week's video class. I hope that everything's making sense to you. Please work hard on this chapter. Don't forget to make your flashcards for your new vocabulary words and also for your new demonstrative pronoun, iste. And we will pick up with chapter 25 when we return in 2 weeks. Hope you have a wonderful week off. I hope you work hard on your Latin, do a little bit each day, and I think you're doing a great job, and I look forward to seeing you after the break. Valete!